Hey, welcome to Creative Block. We're your hosts, V.
And Megan. We interview people in creative industries about their life, work, and hobbies while we doodle jam.
We asked people on Twitter if they had, and Instagram, because we're on Instagram now, don't forget.
Yay!
If they had specific topics they wanted us to discuss, as well as some drawing prompts.
Today with us we have Bill and Bob. Ask the guest. Oh my god, I always do that. I'm sorry.
This is how you know we're for real, and we're doing this intro live every time. Bill and Bob, hi!
Hello! Thanks for having us. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. This is so exciting. There's so many people who want to ask you so many questions, and
Bring them on.
Yes! And we're going to get to them. But before, I do kind of want to talk a little bit about you guys' career, your journey, how you met, and all these fun things.
Sure.
But I want to start first with it's a little bit broad, but I think that'll kind of get us right into the subject with the question, which is kind of when did you realize you were going to write for animation? That was going to be your path.
Mm-hmm. Good question. I think, at least for me, it was kind of stumbling into it, and also totally what I was born to do all at the same time. I don't know, as an animation writer, you run into people in, dinner parties or whatever. Not that I go to dinner parties, but whatever. You run into people and they're like, "Oh, animation, so you draw?" And you're like, "No, I don't draw. I and nobody ever considers that there's a writer. That said, I grew up watching Warner Brothers and MGM cartoons Saturday mornings, and every day after school I was obsessed with cartoons. Bill and I first met. Bill was being chased by a brontosaurus, and I saved him. Bill and I first met in 1990 at a summer production workshop at USC to make a live-action short film. And again, I don't think we realized it at the time, but what we made was a live-action cartoon. It was the cartooniest, movie you could make in, with two kids, black and white non-sync film camera. Mm-hmm. And so, animation, I think, was there, and we kind of found our way a year after that to Walt Disney Television Animation and Darkwing Duck. Mm-hmm. We heard through the grapevine that they were looking for premises. Really, they had a dire need for them. Mm-hmm. And so we threw our hat into the ring there, and one thing led to another, and that was 10 years of our first stint at Disney Television Animation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is our third go around.
Our third time back at Disney. Yeah.
So you've started together in the industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been working together. Is it 32?
I can't do the math. Wow. What was it? 30? I guess it is.
No, it'll be 33 years this summer if you count that summer at
1990. Sure. Yep.
Yeah, so, I was still a junior in college, or I was going into my senior year, and Bill was working in Colorado as a cameraman.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I started off as a cameraman and an editor.
Oh wow.
And yeah, and it was also strange because I was married and suddenly was back in a dorm situation again, and it was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. Of I had this life where I'm married and I have a home, and now I'm in, rooming up with this, guy. It's weird. Anyway, but I had also I had done claymation both in high school and in college, so that was because as my sketch here proves, I can't draw. At all, but I was fascinated with live action. I mean, with claymation animation, and so I wasn't a cinema or television major, but I should have been, because I spent all my time in college making films. So my GPA was horrendous, But so instead of doing the studies I should have been doing, I was animating claymation for 18 hours straight.
What was your major?
My major was Christian education. I was going to be a pastor.
Oh wow!
And animation, filmmaking was always this hobby, but I never thought it was sort of like a real job. If that makes any sense. But but I've been making little short films since second grade, and a couple of my buddies I grew up with, they were the ones who they went to film school. They ended up working at Disney. They were the ones who opened up the opportunity for us to be able to pitch to Disney.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so your second grade friends can really come in handy.
Keep them close. Don't toss them out.
When you guys first started working together, did you kind of know, you were like, wow, this is it. This is going to be my creative partner for the next 30 years?
No, I don't think. I don't think so, because I'm not sure we had figured out.
I don't think we thought we'd have a career that'd go this long.
Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't that. We had a blast working together, but then
Right.
Bob went off to finish college, and I went back to Colorado, and so it wasn't. I don't know. I'm not sure what we thought was going to come from that experience, other than a good friendship,
Right.
And that even when Bob moved from New York to L.A., he stopped over and stayed with us a couple nights or something.
Couple nights, yeah.
And so we had a blast, but it was that funny thing of when Jim said, "Hey, there's this opportunity on Darkwing Duck," and mistake.
We said, "What's a Darkwing Duck?"
And
the show had not premiered yet. It was just about to premiere.
Yeah, so they sort of explained it and all that good stuff, and
it was a wild time in animation.
Oh yeah,
the old system of doing things was. You would do 65 22-minute episodes
in a row,
1
just
year.
Bam!
Yeah.
Whoa, yeah.
That's so different from today.
There would be gaggles of writers just banging out scripts, some that related to the others and some that were like these fever dreams off in their own little world, and multiple teams of board artists and directors. And then, one showrunner desperately just trying to
bring some sort of continuity.
Some sort of continuity to it all.
And
so
then
that was wild.
So what would happen is, when we originally got hired, we were 2 of 48 writers on staff at TVA.
Whoa!
And,
okay, that's crazy.
Just for Darkwing Duck?
No. It was for all the shows.
All shows.
But
okay.
you're talking 2 or 3 other shows,
Yeah,
that's
I can't remember.
crazy.
There was 15 writers on every show.
Per show. And then what would happen is that they would sort of write their whole, slate of the 65, and then they get moved to the next thing. So what happened with us was all of the Darkwing Duck crew had been moved on to Bonkers? Was that it?
Yeah, I think it was.
And so we, but ABC,
and then the network,
which was ABC, which Disney didn't own at that time. They were
Darkwing
airing
Ducks.
Yeah, it's performing well.
They want more. And suddenly they were like, well, we don't have anybody to do
to write it, because they've all been moved to another thing.
So that's how we got in. We got in because ABC wanted to see more Darkwing Duck. God bless ABC.
That's awesome. Did you guys have a spec or any kind of a little bit of type of portfolio type?
Bill's laughing because he knows what story I'm going to tell. I'm a big old nerd. I'm a big nerd. I love Star Wars. I love Star Trek. And I had written a Star Trek: The Next Generation. Again, just to let you know how flippin' old we are. That show was still in production at the time. It wasn't crazy to be writing a Star Trek: The Next Generation. So,
and I had written, by the way, a Cheers spec. So again,
Bill wrote a very good Cheers spec. And I was working on a comedy at the time, but I did not have one ready to go. So, because I knew Bill and I knew Bill's friends. Bill's childhood best friend was, did you say this, Bill? Was the star of our little live action
I don't think we connected those dots. So yes,
Yeah,
Jim
yeah.
was the
Bill's childhood friend Jim was the star of the movie we made at USC.
right.
Okay.
So, and he was a writer at Disney. So when I moved out, I quickly contacted him and said, "Hey, let's hang out." And he said, "Oh, they're looking for," or no, he introduced me to one of the executives at Disney. He said, "You should meet these people." And
there's always front door, back door. You guys all know this.
So this was the front door. This was the executive who was in charge of inhaling all the spec scripts and telling you can or cannot write here, right? So she said, "Do you have a script?" And I was like, "Well, I've got a Star Trek: The Next Generation, but it's not funny." And she's like, "Well, I want to read it anyway." I was like, "Okay, but just understand, it's not funny. I'm working on a funny one. There's moments of comedy in this episode. But, it's Captain Picard going, "Oh, Riker." "Oh, number one, you buffoon." That's what passed for a joke in that episode. So I gave it to her, and then that thing about ABC wanting more Darkwing Ducks happened, like literally the next day. And the story editor of that show, Doug Langdale, we got in touch with him, and he's like, "Can you guys come up with some Darkwing Duck premises?" And we're like, "Absolutely. First, we're gonna have to figure out what is a premise and what is a Darkwing Duck." But other than that, yeah, we're there.
And we pitched. I think we pitched 15 different. Not all at once, though. And by the way, pro tip: don't ever pitch more than 5 of a thing.
Yeah,
because
we pitched 3 batches of 5.
Yeah, if you're not hitting it in 5, you're not going to hit it in 20. So
I
just figure it, get the notes and figure out what you're not hitting, and then try
with that
again.
Before that first batch, we're like, because we're little rule followers, we're like, but we haven't been approved to write. That executive has my Star Trek script, but she hasn't said it's okay. And he said, "I don't care about that. Just give me the ideas." So we started pitching ideas. Finally, one gets through. They're like, "We like this one. We're sending it to ABC with 3 other premises, 2 written by Tad Stones, the creator of Darkwing Duck, and 1 written by Doug Langdale, the story editor."
Interject one thing here. Because we were so newbies, all we knew was that they said, "We're going to submit your premise to the network," and Bob and I are like, "Yay!" Like that, that's what it takes, And so I hop on a flight from Denver to LA, gonna hang out with Bob to write this episode, only to discover, oh, no, they just submitted it. They didn't pick it. And you're up against, by the way, the two from Doug and 1 from Tad, and
and by the way, this is again 1991. I'm sitting in my little studio apartment in
Studio City.
In Studio City, and I've bought one of these newfangled modems, which will transmit 1 page of text to Bill in about 15 minutes. And we're like, "Wow, this is high tech craziness."
That's what I was gonna say. I was like, because at the time, emails were like
that wasn't really.
Neither of us had email at the time. It was,
okay, yeah.
So did we? Gosh,
no. Because I would call you up and say, "I'm about to transmit to you the script," and then we disable call waiting and put the phone on the modem. It was so crazy. But anyway, and so I remember being there, finding out that we are 1 of 4 premises submitted to the network for 1 slot. Up against, the 3, whatever, 2 from Doug and 1 from Tad or whatever it was, and thinking, how am I going to explain to my wife that I just paid for a plane ticket for nothing? So I decided, you know what? Let's just see how this plays out. I'll tell her once we know. And
these drawings are fantastic, by the way, guys. Sorry, completely off topic. All right, so we get the word. ABC hated the other 3 premises, loved our premise. They want to move forward with that one. We're like, oh, fantastic.
So,
by the way, that was Halloween, 1991. So we always know exactly how long we've been professionals in this business.
That's so cool.
So we're all we're excited. We're going to celebrate.
We're excited. We're just trying to decide, do we start writing today? It's Halloween. Should we just start on November 1st? Or do we go out and party right now? And the phone rings, And it's that executive I gave my Star Trek script to, and she read it and she said, "It's a very good script, but it's not funny. I'm sorry, I can't recommend you." And I said, "Oh, well, Doug Langdale just got our premise through on Darkwing Duck, so we're starting that tomorrow morning." She's like, "Oh, okay, good luck to you. Bye." So I guess the whole point is, and I've told this story in front of current Disney execs, and they get very annoyed, but there's the front door and the back door, and you should go through the front door, of course. But if you can find the back door, go through the back door.
Yeah, do that too.
Make connections with people working on the shows.
Go back in time to 2nd grade. Befriend everyone.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, everybody you were a jerk to in 2nd grade. Reconsider.
That's awesome, though. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, and then it was a kind of a one and done thing. You know, so we finished writing the script, and you know, I go back to Denver, and back to video editing and shooting, and then ABC killed a few more. So, or they extended the order or something.
I don't remember exactly how it happened.
Anyway, suddenly they needed more. So
they needed a lot more suddenly, and we got hired on staff starting this. Well, it was like January 1992. We started on staff.
Yeah, so it was very
smooth sailing ever since.
And one of the things too that was kind of funny was part of, I think, that affected how we worked together was when, you know, there wasn't such a thing really as a laptop. You know,
laptops were like a huge piece of luggage at the time.
So I had a Macintosh SE 20 megabytes, you know, which was like pretty robust, right, at the time. And Bob had, I think, the equivalent. But so when I flew out to LA, there was just one computer, and so Bob would, it was the outline or whatever, Bob would write a scene in prose of the story, and I would read. I think I was reading Flash Gordon comic strips, right, or something, because that was something you loved and I didn't know yet. So to increase our sort of creative vocabulary with each other, and also they're just fun. And
I gotta stop you for one sec. Have you ever read the original Alex Raymond Flash Gordon scripts? First off, they are the most beautiful artwork you'll ever see. He was a genius. But also, if you read, they're meant to be read every Sunday, right? Like, you read it, here's Flash, oh no, he's being attacked by a dragon. How's he going to get out of this? Oh, here's how he gets out of this. And then they leave you on a cliffhanger. Oh no, Flash has been surrounded by Ming the Merciless's evil henchman. What's he going to do? And then next week he'd come back and see how he got away from the henchman, but he was attacked by ice. They're great, I'm sure, if you read them separated by 6 days. But if you read them all at once, you're like, when did these people go to the bathroom?
Or
it's
eat
just
or
one
sleep.
long stream of consciousness where they're attacked constantly for like 3 years straight, and then they had a night's rest. And then...
Yeah. So anyway, what would happen is Bob would write his pass at the scene, and then I would rewrite that scene, and then I would write my pass at the next scene, and then he would rewrite my scene and then do his scene, and we would kind of stagger like that. And that sort of, I don't know, I guess that sort of built a sense of our rhythm a little
collaboration.
And our collaboration, and we kind of learned to sort of trust each other's editing and input. And it was also very pragmatic because we just had the one computer. And I think even at Disney for a while we only had the one computer.
Yeah, when we started at Disney, they only had one computer for us.
Wow. Really? That's so funny.
Yeah,
because you came in as a pair, so they were just oh, they're one person.
We'll get you another one. It took them like 2 months, I think, to
get another one.
Second computer.
And they were Sperry 8088s, and they were those green screen C:prompt kind of, you know, things.
How did we ever write
it was
I do recall like doing spell checks on them took like
an hour.
Minutes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
So that's why we had a dartboard. I mean, it's not unlike, I guess part of the reason there's like pool tables and, you know, all this sort of gaming stuff and sort of in the video game industry and computer tech industry is it just that's what you would do when you had to render files. It took forever. So we had a dartboard because when we ran spell check, it took forever. So is it the computer's grinding?
Play darts. and then be like, oh, it beeped. Let's see.
Aladdin.
No, Darkwing is a word.
Yeah,
we should let it tell Darkwing.
Yeah, Aladdin is spelled right. Yes.
Yeah.
Grind.
That's so funny. I wonder sometimes because I feel like when I talk with like animators, like artists who also like had to go through that like painful like digital time, like there's a little bit of like, I guess maybe you had to think about things more before you kind of put them in the machine, I guess. And do you feel like that's something like do you feel like it's something that's helped you think about your scripts before like typing it out more?
One of the things that is a practice that we do that's very old school, and our writer's room always sort of kicks against it, but Bob and I are believers in physical 3x5 index cards.
Okay.
And the reason for that, and I know all the writing programs, all the writing programs have the virtual way of doing that, right? But they all allow you to cheat, because you could just type and type and type, and you could write a freaking book in one of those little index cards, right? But the whole point of the index cards is to build a skeleton. And in fact we use a fat Sharpie. We don't even use like the thin end of a Sharpie. We use a fat Sharpie, and we write, Molly goes to school. That's like the first, and that's a card. Bam! Then she, then next moment, next scene.
Scratch eats a pizza.
Right.
Boom. Like, but we don't want them to get too complicated, because you want to be able to look at it.
You're getting the
at a glance and get the whole story.
Yeah.
You don't want to get lost in the weeds.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna ask how long, like, because the process was like so elongated because of technology. How long would you guys have to like write, like basically complete?
Same amount of time.
Just checking.
I think it was, but it was. I mean, a lot of writing, and Megan, I've never done your job because obviously you've seen my drawing. But I feel like, for writing for sure, and I imagine it's true with storyboarding too, there's a lot of think time, right? You're kind of trying to figure out how you can approach the shot, how you going to stage it, so writing is very similar. It's just you do it with a pen in your hand, we do it with the keyboard, but there's a lot of reflection time. So it's not like you're sitting there in your office just typing and typing away.
Yeah, totally.
Really?
And if we are, it's only because we're searching something else on the internet. Like, can I get tickets for this? Or whatever. So I think it's, so the actual writing time, even with the slow computer, wasn't, making a whole lot of difference. It was really more about learning how to collaborate and make use of our think time effectively. So,
something we've done from the very beginning is talk it through until you can pretty much see all of it. I mean, that's not that, we're obviously open to collaboration down the road, but when Bill and I sit down to write it, we know pretty much what it's going to be beat by beat, moment by moment. And that's something that came out of that time. We were like, well, we don't have a lot of time to write this script, and we only have one computer, so.
And it's spell checking forever, so.
So we're up against a deadline. Let's make sure we're on the same page from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And and that's still some of the most fun part of the job, is just sitting down with the stack of cards and the bulletin board.
What do we put? There's also a kind of, I like the tactile nature of index cards, because sometimes you realize, well, first of all, you're like, what would be better? What if we unpin that moment and we move that here and you pin that back here, and so you're moving things around, and it's
and you can take things off the board and say, literally, let's put a pin in this one and put it over here. So we may come back to it,
but maybe not. But clink, and then sometimes you realize this was a wrong direction, and there's something very, I don't know.
It's satisfying to rip up the card.
Yeah, so you're sort of like, okay.
That gives you permission to go, that idea is dead, we're not doing that
anymore. Coming back. It's ripped in half.
Nice.
But we also do a practice especially when we're kind of approaching something new, of we don't start at the beginning necessarily. Bob and I, we tend to cut the script in half. Bob will often say, do you want the first half or the back half? Or if we're doing like a feature script, we'll say, what scene do you want to write? And and sometimes it's helpful to start with the thing that you feel like you can picture the best.
The scene you're most excited about.
Yeah.
That's so interesting because it's something that on a previous show that Megan and I worked on where we met on Thundercats, the showrunner worked that way. He would tell us, like when you start boarding, just do all the scenes you like, and then the other ones you could just gotta do kind of fast.
Yeah, but there's something true and helpful about that. You can also tell for the people who started at the beginning and had a lot of enthusiasm and then ran out of time. So as the episode progresses, it's like it's really lush and lavish and intricate, and then pretty soon
every moment is really well staged and thought out. The gags are great.
Then it's stick figures and like maybe a rough horizon line or something.
Slapdash. Yeah.
So, and I mean, we everybody does that. Everyone hits that deadline. It's like, oh no, But and the same thing happens with writing too. But so sometimes you can figure out, hey, I wonder what scene they started with. It's probably the one that is the most vividly written.
Do you guys have a preference between writing for TV or writing for like features, like you said?
They're two different muscles, It's the difference between going for a run and going for a swim. They're both equally valid forms of exercise. And it's fun to mix them up. It's actually fun to work on them at the same time.
Yeah, we've been lucky enough to do that.
It can be exhausting, but somehow, like, while you're pecking away at the TV script, which has got to be done like you're shooting from the hip, there's a part of your brain that's also like, God, I don't know why I'm making this a gun analogy. But there's a part of you that's a sniper going.
Because we're Americans.
It's
all about guns.
There's a part of your brain that's like focusing in on that moment and going, okay, I know just what this needs to be when when we're done with the script and we're turning back to that. I've figured out this problem in it. They're more complicated puzzles to piece together.
Yeah, so I will say one of the things, both have their assets and their liabilities, right?
Yep.
And I think especially if you're talking about an animated feature, like with TV, as Bob said, you kind of gotta go fast. It's kind of take your first best guess, and there's a few chances to refine that, but generally speaking, you have to be a little looser and faster and kind of,
it's a little more shoot from the hip.
A little more, yeah. And sometimes you look at it like, well, guess we should have thought of that one a little more. Oh well. But I think that the other problem with when you're doing a feature production is you've seen that moment for 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. You've heard that joke a million times, and so is everyone you're showing the scenes to, and so you've got objectively, you've got a really good, funny scene, but now we've seen it 1,000 times. It's no longer effective for us. So it's really easy to go, blow it up, it's not working. And we've only got 6 months to release. Let's just race and come up with something else. And that's, that's not necessarily, what you had was probably really good too. You've just gotten bored with it. So I think it's important there's a little bit of balance between the two. It's nice to take a little more time. It's also kind of nice to move a little quicker or trust your instinct, or have someone. Who was it that Bob that we were talking to? Is it the
shoot, I'm blanking on his name. I know who you're talking about.
That
Jack, the story editor on Vanfidia. Is that what you're thinking
I
of?
think so. Where is that they write down what was
loose but tight? No, I think we're thinking of two different people.
Two different things. But
I don't know where you're going, Bill. You're on your own.
No, anyway, the one I'm thinking of is that the director's wife sits in on one of the early screenings.
Stephen Moffat. His wife, he writes the script, and this is when he was working on his sitcom Coupling, which is a fantastic BBC show if you've ever seen it. He sits up in his attic and writes the script, and then he brings it down to her. She's a producer on the show. and she puts a check mark next to everything that makes her laugh. And then, they get it to the actors and they put it up on the stage and they, laugh at it, and decide what's working, decides what's not working. But she notices invariably, like, if that process starts on Monday, by Friday, people have heard the jokes too many times. It's not funny to them anymore, and they start to go, I don't know. What about this line? Can we try something different there? And that's when she like pulls out that script and goes, "No, I laughed at it here. We're leaving it."
That's so smart. Yeah.
That's really good. Yeah, because I feel like having worked in feature for a little bit, I definitely saw that process too. And I've always wondered about that, like how I think that's such a smart thing to do, just to remember, like, yeah, that was funny, and not like get lost in that.
I get how it happens. You start to get a little bit of tunnel vision and delirium. But you've seen it 1,000 times, and you're full of like any artist, you're full of self-doubt and
second guessing,
and imposter syndrome, and oh no, they're spending millions upon millions of dollars for this movie. Have I messed it up?
And there's a lot of pressure from the executive set too to make sure that they're going to deliver a film that performs. So everyone's got a lot of pressure on these things. But anyway, easy for me to say I'm not the one paying for it, but but I do feel like if it made you laugh 50 times in a row, and maybe on the 52nd you're like, or whatever, if it'll. A good chance it will make the audience laugh at least one time, and one time maybe all you need.
One time's all you need.
Oh yeah. That's so cool that like I'm gonna ask kind of like a little bit of like a trades I guess question, but like when did you guys I'm guessing you have an agent, like representation. When did you guys feel like get an agent? Because from what you just said, like your stories, like you kind of got in through the back door, so I'm guessing you didn't have an agent.
We did not have an agent then. The trick, the catch-22 of an agent is no agent wants to represent you when you don't have work, and you can't get work unless you have an agent. So we pretty quickly, once we got the job, went out and got an agent. We were with that guy for I don't know, a few years, 2, 3, 4. Maybe. Then we moved over to the Gotham group, and we've been there ever since.
Cool.
And that's, all of that is a tricky dance too, because the relationship with your agent or manager is they're both a guide, they're a critic in some ways, in a helpful way. They also, the advantage of them, of course, is that they get to play bad cop and the good cop, bad cop of negotiations, And so
I feel like we've got a certain amount of chips we can play where we can annoy people to get our way. And we'd rather not waste those on getting ourselves money. We'd rather somebody else do that. And then we can save all those to actually make the show better. So we've got our stack of chips. If we're the ones going, no, we need more money, give us more money, then, like, by the time the negotiations get done, we may be out of chips, and then it's like, now what do we do?
It's like,
also, we just plain suck at negotiations. We are terrible at it.
I think for a lot of artists, that's the case, right? It's kind of like, because you guys were talking about imposter syndrome and like self-doubt, and I feel like when you have that, it's really hard to be like, I deserve more.
No doubt.
Yeah.
So I think there's something, I think that's really good, but it's the constant conundrum, and I think the industry kind of, it's an intentional barrier, right? To have you be like, well, you can't pitch to us without an agent, but you can't get an agent unless you've had work, and it feels like an impossible situation, and I think there's sort of if they're smart enough to figure out this maze, then they'll be smart enough to do the show. I don't know. So I think that is sort of the first test of your resilience to get into the industry. In some ways.
Unfair as it is.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of good to hear that you guys had like other jobs while you were like testing out to like write, like before, right? Like Bill, you were like editing and like cameraman, and Bob, were you, when you were looking for your first gigs, what did you do to like sustain yourself, if that's okay to ask?
So I when Bill and I met, I was a junior in college, or I just finished my junior year. So I had that 1 year of doing that. I worked since high school. I worked at the local bank.
Wow.
I saved up enough money that I was able to lead a little humble existence here in Los Angeles, just long enough to land a staff job. So, I had my job where I was, the file clerk in the room. My last year working in the bank, they literally had me in the basement going through cards from World War II.
Oh my god!
Digitized. It was just me sitting in a basement going through filing cards all day.
Wow.
That was the. If you have any doubts about leaving, here you go.
That's so crazy. I like to ask these questions because I feel like it kind of helps for anybody who's like trying to break in, like it's good to be a little practical sometimes and like be like it's okay to have another job while you're like,
absolutely. I mean, I take no credit for it myself. I just managed to thread the needle perfectly strictly through dumb luck, like
and talent, right?
Sure, I mean,
it was a good script. It wasn't funny, but it was good.
Yeah. I mean, sure. When opportunity knocks, you have to have the talent
to do it. Right.
But I never want to lose sight of the fact that I got extraordinarily lucky to be at the right place at the right time. So I didn't have to wait tables or do whatever. And
I think all of us know people who are very talented who just never seem to get the right break. And and the difference between that person and you, it's like, what is there a difference, or is it you just were in the right place at the right time with the right portfolio with the right demeanor? Who knows? I mean, it's just and that's why I think Bob and I keep copious amounts of gratitude with this, that we've been able to kind of make a living and a career in this industry when so many people that we know and love have attempted and it hasn't necessarily worked out the way they hoped.
Yeah.
That said, I I do think, in fact, I was just telling this to somebody even earlier today, I think the biggest mistake people make in their 20s is that they're not bold enough. That they kind of want to jump into chasing their craft risk-free, or at least with as little risk as possible. They want to, I want to move to Los Angeles to work, in the entertainment industry, but with a job in hand. And it's just like,
that's not going to happen.
That's just not going to happen.
Got to roll the dice. But the other thing is, especially if you're someone who's, looking to write, you got to have your spec scripts ready to go. Like, don't show up here and go, I've got them all in my head, I just need to type them up. No, you need to have them
literally
in your hand, right?
In your hand. And you got to always be writing. I mean, that's the thing. I think,
and for artists, I think
that's true
you got to
too.
have your portfolio ready to go.
Like if the last storyboard you have to show was something from 15 years ago, it might be an excellent storyboard, but people are going to be like, and what have you done since that? So I think they want to know that you are constantly investing in your craft, whether or not you've been paid for that specific thing. That you're getting paid, hopefully, but you're also investing your own time and effort into strengthening your skill and getting better and better. So Bob and I try to kind of always have a project in the hamper that we're thinking about.
Yeah, because you guys have been working on Molly for like a long time. You said that was like way
I think 15 years I think was the first.
15 years ago,
that was the first version of it. Yeah.
There were some false starts too. Like we at one point we a friend had a job at Stars, and he was like, I've got carte blanche to hire whoever I want to do whatever I want, and I'm going to give that to you guys. I'm going to give you money, write whatever pilot you want to write. I don't care. I just trust you guys so much. I want to be in business with, which he's still a dear friend and was a very generous offer. And we were like, great, let's bring out Molly McGee. We're going to start doing that. And it was a weird thing. I was in the hospital with pneumonia, and I was like, well, I'm trapped here with an oxygen tube up my nose, but I'm going to do something because I was just bored, right? Mm-hmm. So I got out my laptop and I started to write it, and I wrote like a page of it. And then I was like, it's just not right. It's not the right time for this. And we had another idea that felt like this was the right time for that and the opportunity to do that. And I was like, you know what, Molly, please sit back for a moment. We'll come back to you someday, I promise. And that was like, 12 years down the road, we're like, hey, Molly, it's your turn. So
how did you guys know it wasn't the right time for Molly? Like, would you say like just like the trance, the humor? Like
nobody bought it.
Oh.
I mean, pragmatically, I think that's part of it, right?
Well,
it wasn't getting any interest.
We could have played that chip that Jay Fukudo gave us. We could have played it on that. Instead, we did the other pilot we did, which I think it just felt like there was something about the timing that wasn't quite right for it then. And then, there were also times, Bill's right, we pitched it at Nickelodeon to an executive who had gotten fired earlier that afternoon.
Oh my
God. Yeah, that was hilarious too, because he said, it's not going to work here, and it's not going to work at the studio I'm going to. Like, so we just pitched and failed at 2 studios in an afternoon. That's fantastic.
Yes!
Very efficient.
That's what I was kind of going to ask you guys is, like, you were able to, like, have it on the back burner for 15 years, but that means that if you pitch it to a bunch of studios and nobody picks it up, it's not, like, dead, right? You can bring it back. And how did you kind of...
And by the way, all the studio execs change over time. So by the time we pitched it again to Disney, nobody was around that had been around that first time.
The very first place we pitched it was Disney. And they're like, oh, it's cute, it's funny. Not for us right now because reasons XYZ. I mean, the thing of it, I've been trying to stamp this out on Twitter. People see these stories and they're like, oh, they pitched it at Nickelodeon. Why didn't Nickelodeon buy it? Nickelodeon's evil and foolish. It's like, they're not. They just, they needed a round peg and we had a square peg. And if we had tried to force our square peg through their round peg hole, it would have been a disaster for them and us. Yeah. You gotta find a time where it's the right fit for the right place. And, you hope all your children get to flourish that way, but if it's not the right time for them, you just tuck them back in the back of your brain and vow that you'll come back to them someday. And we got a handful of those ideas.
And I think that probably when we did bring it back to Disney, it really became, I think, apparent to you and I. Part of what I think did make it help move forward was we're like, at its core, this is a Disney show. It is. It's got a much more optimistic, hopeful, earnest kind of tone, even though it's very playful and goofy and, funny. But we're just, ultimately, it does feel like a better fit for Disney. But and we've worked at like a lot of different studios and have had a great time at those studios. Bob and I were on Penguins of Madagascar, for example, over at Nickelodeon, and that was a blast. We had the time of our life. But anyway, it was just, I think, sometimes it's finding the right home as well as the right time.
Right. And never taking it personally when someone says no. It's not.
Yeah.
There's only one time we pitched something where someone said no that I took it personally. So here's a little story. I'll make it as fast as I can. We pitched a movie to Nickelodeon. They didn't know what it was going to be when we pitched it to them.
And it was a live action movie.
It was a live action movie. We pitched it, and the executive said, I love this pitch. Here's the problem. We've got another movie just like this in development. And
And he even said, I like
He
your
said,
version better.
I like
but
your version
Oh my
better.
gosh.
I think you may have just killed that other one, but I can't buy this one. And then he vowed that like he'd find something for us to work together with, and he was true to his word. Anyways, so we walked away going, we've got a good pitch here. That just was bad timing with that place. Like a month later, we get set up to.
It may have been a week later.
Yeah, it was not long, but a friend was like, "Hey, this place is looking for movies that are Nickelodeon style movies. You guys should go in and pitch them." They're like, "That's great. We've got a Nickelodeon style movie that literally the Nickelodeon movie exec said, I love this pitch." So we're like, it's
Right?
bullseye for what a Nickelodeon movie pitch should be.
Mm-hmm.
So we went in and pitched to this guy and his assistant. And we got to and we could tell it wasn't going great. There's just a vibe sometimes when you know things aren't going right. And we get to the end of it, and he says, "Wow, I didn't know where you were going with that, and not in a good way."
Yeah, he could not have been sort of more like, let's be done. And right.
And then he said, when you said it, and that's the end of Act 1, I thought, oh my God, there's more of this? And he and his assistant are laughing at that, and yeah, we took that part personally. So we walked out of there and called our friend and said, that was a disaster. I don't know why you thought we would be a good fit with these people. So, and he talked to them, and they're like, no, they loved you. It just wasn't right for them. I'm like, no, we're not right for them. It's like,
Yeah.
Years, literally like a decade later, we took a meeting at a studio, and that assistant walked in, and she made eye contact with us, and she's like, I feel like I've met you guys before. Bill didn't recognize her, and he goes, really? I don't recall you. Where could we have possibly met? I pegged her right away, and I was like, nope, we've never met. Good to meet you. Hi, I'm Bob. This is Bill. We've never met you before, ever, in any context, ever.
So
That's so funny.
one of the things like getting to the pitching woes, because pitching stories are always funny, I think. But I think part of it is, you got to know what your idea is about at its core. But you also have to leave enough green space on it so that whoever is creating it with you, whatever company, whatever the executives are, that there's a place for them to put their fingerprints on it too. So that they want to help shape it. Nobody wants you to just come in with a completed script ready for shooting, because that's just not going to happen. And so I think the fact that you can kind of come in with the core of an idea that is solid but flexible enough to grow in the development process, I think is important. But we've had the other part too is, as Bob said, you don't know necessarily from the pitch meeting itself of how you're doing. So the absolute, well, we for example, we pitched, I won't say where it is right now, but we would go into a pitch to a place and they'd be like, oh my gosh, that is the best pitch I've ever heard. I can't wait. I think this is excellent. And you tell your agent, like, it was so great. It was so good. And then you hear nothing for like 3 months. And then like, oh yeah, they passed. And you're like, what?
Oh, no.
Like, that was amazing. How did that go wrong? And we've actually twice, one time we pitched one place and we pitched 2 projects. And the executive was super excited about them both. Said, I don't know which one I want to buy first. And we walked out of there going like, that went fantastic. And then read in the trades.
That was a Friday night.
Yeah.
Read in the trades Monday morning. Literally after we walked out of her office, they fired her.
Oh my gosh.
No.
I mean, you're just like,
we pitched
what?
at like 4:30 at Friday. And then like, her 5 o'clock was, don't come in Monday.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So, I mean, just hilarious. And then another one.
We're hoping not based on, I love these guys and their ideas.
Yeah. Oh, that shows you have poor judgment. Yeah, and then we also pitched, we had a project kind of get greenlit, and then the financial crisis of 2008 happened and all the funding went away. Just like,
wow.
And again, it was like on a Friday or whatever it was, and then on the next business day, like, oh, that's all gone. But anyway, one of the things too, we've had great pitches where you're in the room and you're like, wow, that couldn't have gone better, and nothing comes from it. And then we had what was probably our most disastrous pitch, where I was getting over like SARS. I had just incredible illness, and Bob, it's a discipline Bob has, but when he's nervous, he intentionally makes himself slow down when he's pitching because he doesn't want to rush through it. So we went over to the studio to pitch, and
it was a pre-existing property. So they'd sent us sort of like, hey, here's what we're thinking. How would you change it? And we get there. It's pouring rain. Bill's just trying not to cough a lung up. And as we're sitting there, we do the thing where we go in and like the assistant's like, hey, can I get you a bottle of water? Do you need hot tea, anything? We're like, oh, no, we're fine. We'll just sit here and wait by this conference room. And we can hear through the door, it sounds like there's a bachelor party going on in there.
I mean,
like there's just peals of laughter.
So
the door opens and this guy steps out. We won't name who it was. And the head of the network is there with him, and he says, "Oh, and I'm sorry." During the peals of laughter, I start to hear, there's the character names. They're like, somebody's in there pitching on the same project we're here to pitch on, and they're killing.
Yeah.
They're like, we should just get up and leave right now. Because there's no chance for us to get this.
And in my memory, I'm sure this is exactly how it was, but in my memory, when the door opened, it was like the room was flooded with light. Like a heavenly light, right? And so there's the person who's done the pitching, who's a noted sort of celebrity person, film,
and there's the head of the network, and he says, "This was so great. Thank you. We'll be in touch," and hugs him.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And then they look at us and go,
Oh, right.
You two.
Oh, no.
Come on in. So we're pitching to a room we already know we're dead. And there was one exec who was the person who invited to us. She was down the rungs of the ladder there. And she's gamely trying to laugh at everything.
Trying to give a little of... I'm just trying not to cough. And then again, in my mind's eye, it went from a room flooded with light to the dimmest lit room ever. And again, it's raining, and it's... and the head of the network is listening to us just kind of quietly.
And I'm trying to get through it all so it's just coherent. Just so these people don't ask, why have you wasted our time with this? But we can tell, they hate this. They hate everything
and
about
Bob
it.
Bob is, in my mind, pitching in slow motion. He's like, well...
It was terrible. It was terrible. So we get to the end of it. The head of the network goes, that was very thorough. I have no notes. Because he just wants to leave. He just wants to get out of there.
You want a lot of different reactions. You want love it or hate it or whatever. But thorough is never the word you want used. So we walked out of there.
We get up, leave. We go to the car. We call our agent and say, not only did we not get this job, we're never going to get any job at this studio ever.
We tanked that. That's just take that one off the list.
So we go home, we start working on other things. A few weeks later, we see in the trades. Sure enough, the trades were still a thing. Sure enough, that guy who got the hug, he's got the job. He's going to make this show this big, spectacular success. All right. God bless. Good on you. A few weeks later, we get a phone call from that junior executive who laughed gamely through the whole pitch. And she's like, yeah, that guy completely flaked out on us. He's wasted the entire production schedule, and
he quit.
We need you to come in right away. Can you come take this job today?
Literally today.
Oh my god,
that's crazy. I think that's so interesting because I feel like the story is such a testament to you just keep showing up, right? It's show up, do the work, you never know.
That is exactly the point.
Wow.
You've nailed it, Dee. That's the point.
That's
you don't
crazy.
know. We've been in the pitches where they're like, we love this, and nothing ever comes of it. And we've been in the pitches where it's like, okay, please just get out of my office, and we got that job. So
wow, that's so crazy.
Part of it is a little bit of perseverance and believing in yourself, and part of it is never believing the hype in either direction, right? Never believe we think this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and also not believing this is a disaster. How dare you foist this upon us? You've ruined the studio. don't believe either of those.
Mhm.
Believe in yourself.
How do you guys approach pitching? Like how do you kind of like approach putting together your presentation? Like you were just talking, you just had this story about this guy who apparently like put on like a real show, right? Are you guys kind of more like improv type, razzle dazzle types, or what's your?
Give him this. Well, yeah, because I'm non-linear. I always like, if I start to pitch, I'm like, oh, I forgot this key part, and blah blah blah, and I'm going back, and it makes Bob crazy. Like, you can see the steam come out of his ears. He's like Bob hates pitching, but he's like, I like it better than you pitching. And so I think that but
you know what, our pitches are, we just sit down and tell you a story.
Right.
We tell you the story of what we're going to do. Here's what the show's going to be. Here's who the characters are. There's a little bit of light acting in it, which is
but we kind of distrust people who can pitch really, really well.
Yeah.
Because those
every time
they should be actors. Like, if you can pitch great, you're an actor. You should be on the other side of the camera. You know. But anyway, so we tend
every time we've been in the story editor producer position where we hire the writer who comes in with a fantastic pitch where it's super slick and they're really dynamic. Those scripts always wind up being the worst. The absolute worst. They're because they just you get bamboozled, right? Like, I want the guy, when I'm looking at a writer, I want the guy who comes in with a crumpled piece of paper and he's sweating. And he's like, okay, here's my pitch. And you're like, can you speak up? I need you to, I can't hear you, so can you please speak up? And they're like, okay, I was thinking Molly and Scratch was a funny thing. And you're like, yeah, that's great. Let's do that one.
But, you know, and I mean, in truth, you got to be interesting and dynamic enough that you engage the conversation. I mean, one of the more successful pitches we had was, we had pitched at another studio, not Disney, and we pitched a couple ideas, and they were one of the ones that had constantly said, that was great, and then 3 months later, would nothing come through. So they wanted us to come in and pitch again, and we sort of said, I don't know, that never goes well like this, to our agent. She said, well, how about they want to tell you what they're looking for, and then you can create a pitch more around what they want. I'm like, okay, that seems fine. So we go in to hear what they're looking for, and so the executive's sort of explaining it, and I look over at Bob, and I'm like, well, this kind of reminds me of this idea we have. And Bob's like, yeah. And the executive suddenly is very intrigued. Like, what idea? What's that idea? And so we're trying to remember together the pitch, like, in the most sort of clunky, but in a way it kind of worked. Like, it was sort of like well, remember, it was sort of this. Oh yeah. And then he had this friend and da. And that worked well enough that we got a pilot out of it. So. And again, so I don't know. It's just, you just keep slugging. You keep going out there and trying.
That's so funny. That's so
best.
funny. It's great also to like hear that you've done so much between like feature TV and pitching. And do you feel like when did you guys start pitching in your career? Like, did you start writing out scripts and then you were like, oh, maybe we could come up with ideas for a show, or were you always just pitching shows?
I think
because
we started pitching episodes for, like, you know, this whatever show we were on. So you'd have to go into your story editor and sort of go, I was thinking about something like this. So we kind of learned, I think, the nuts and bolts of how to efficiently present the idea. And then
I think it was like a decade before we had a solid decade of just writing before we started going, you know, we could come up with our own ideas.
Yeah. Although did we? Well, gee. Yeah. When did we do the Lady and the Tramp sequel?
It was
that after our decade?
No.
It was before. Yeah. I mean, that one was a. Hey guys, we're gonna cut you loose because end of your contract, we don't really have anything for you. And this was earlier on. This may have been like 5, 6, 7 years into that first decade at Disney, but then it was sort of, well, you know what? We're just starting up this direct to video department, and Bob and I had worked on Return of Jafar with the whole Alan writing crew.
Mhm.
Because that wasn't originally, that didn't start off as a movie. It started off as the first 4 episodes of the series.
Yeah.
And we kind of hammered that together in a strange way, all of us. But that did well enough. They decided we could do these home videos. So they said, you should meet up with, Sharon Morrill and, talk to her, see maybe there's something there for you guys to do. And so we went and met with Sharon and came up with a pitch for Lady and the Tramp 2. And that, I think, though that wasn't the first one produced, I think that was the first real pitch that we did. And it worked well enough that we ended up doing it. But
would you guys kind of like for aspiring creators that are like maybe like writers currently or like haven't yet have their foot in the industry as a writer, would you kind of advise or like recommend like pitching on actual IPs, or do you think like that's just something that you do more when you're more in the studio already and like kind of know what's going on?
Yeah, it's a tough thing. Like I think there's definitely there's definitely value in working your way up the ranks. Like starting on somebody else's show and working your way up from writer to story editor to okay, now you're ready to produce.
Well, and that's the same. I think storyboard, revisionist to storyboard artist to director to supervising director.
And I think it's perfectly fine to have your pitch in your back pocket for your own original thing. But I think if you roll into Los Angeles fresh out of wherever you've come from, and you happen to manage to sell your idea to a studio, I think it's actually not a good thing. Like you will be eaten alive by this process if you haven't learned the ropes. So I think there's some value to everybody's.
Yeah.
I encourage people to be eager to get their things going and have their own things and have their own pitches, but I think there's also some wisdom in be patient. Your time will come. Yeah. Be ready. Be chip away at that stuff. Be ready when somebody asks you, "Hey, do you have any ideas?"
Yeah, and when opportunity arises, jump in, right? Go for it completely. But and we also for writers, we advise that they have an original idea spec that they've done, and then also an existing currently showing script, right? So pick a show that's currently being produced, because what you want to do. And I'm curious, Megan, like, does this happen for portfolios for board artists as well? And that what they're looking for with writers is we want to see your voice, see what you do, and we also want to see you become invisible and how well you can emulate the style of that particular show. So, like when Bob wrote that Star Trek Next Generation, it should feel like a Star Trek The Next Generation, So is that true for your own? Like, here's what you do if you're left to your own devices, but then here's your portfolio also that shows, here's how I did this existing show and this and this and this.
Well, I did not have a storyboard portfolio when I started. The Pickle and Peanut people took a chance on me.
Okay.
But the show
Pickle and Peanut, that explains everything.
Well,
I say that with great affection.
Those guys are I love those guys.
They took a chance on me, and because the show was like, I could put my voice in it, and it was kind of my brand of humor, I was able to like learn how to board through that. But like you look back and like there are shows that I tested for that I didn't get, and I like at the time I was upset, but it's like like, oh yeah, like I don't think like I would have had fun because it's not like my style. I can't even
not your
like
stuff.
you can't put your voice in it at all. You'd feel like So I think it's similar in that way where it's like you find the shows you're on, it's like you take like Molly, you take it, but then the people working on it also, you guys like they let you put your flavor in it and your flavor and like
we encourage it.
Everybody puts their little like their stink on it, and that's what makes it good. So
we're firm believers in that. Like I know there are people out there who are certified geniuses at this, right? And they know what every frame of the show is going to be, what every sound effect, every music note, every line of dialogue, every eye movement of the character. That's not billing me.
Yeah, we're solid B+ producers, baby.
To us, the fun is seeing what other people bring to it. You know.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, because I don't know. For me, I think that's the fun of it.
Yeah.
I love the fact that, for example, at the beginning of the show, it says created by Bill MOTZ and Bob Roth. That's super fun. I also know it's a lie. I mean, we did sort of create the inception of the idea, but it's really created by everybody who works on the show, who touches the show, who adds to the show. I mean, I think about, like we were talking about how, Megan, you're the one who created the Dead Birds. It started that run.
Autobahn Society, please send your mail to Megan.
Yeah,
complaints.
Fisher, Fisher, and also you were the first, I think, to draw Scratch's butt. As a anthropomorphic actual, not just a globby backside, and that also kind of took a life of its own, and I think that's the fun thing, is that we all see things that you would do and other people be like, oh my gosh, that's so funny, let's do that, let's add to that, those are not things that we would have come up with by ourselves, but when you see it and it feels right for the show, I think part of our job is sometimes to feel like when something doesn't feel right for the show and you adjust it, and hopefully it's sort of a, well, maybe not that, but what if it was this kind of an idea, and I think that's kind of fun. And I like that. I like being surprised at what everyone brings. I'm a little, I don't know. Maybe it's imposter syndrome enough for ourselves, or maybe I'm just bored with my own imagination. But I like seeing the collaborative process.
Yeah, totally. I feel like also that probably comes with being in this industry a while. To trust the professionals you hire. You're like, oh God, I have to do it all by myself. You're like, no, I can actually let other people do the job I hired them for, and So
it's speaking of Pickle and Peanut, for a hot minute, Joel was the director of the Ghost and Molly McGee.
Really?
Oh,
really? It was like almost 2 weeks.
I don't even know if it was that long.
It was a week.
A week, yeah.
He was. I mean, we got along great, and it was really fun. And he had. I mean, I keep thinking what a wildly different show that would have been.
It would have been a very, very different
show. But then he ended up getting another opportunity he felt he needed to take. So
yeah,
that was kind of funny. And but yeah, it was that thing. If with him on that, still would have been created by Bill and Bob, would have been a really different show. And then the great thing about being with Steve Loader, then, who actually joined us as EP and helped just guide the whole visual side of things. We'd worked with Steve since back on Buzz Lightyear's Star Command, and we ran a show together before, and so it was a lot of trust. But Steve, he brought a lot of cool things to it. Most importantly to the show, he was the one who was really let's bring the music in. That we had really, our initial idea was not going to involve songs in every episode. In fact, the pilot that we did, we thought that was going to be a one-off with those songs in it, and then decided, this is really fun. We like this. Let's keep doing it. But and then I think about too, originally, as we had the artist drawing the songs, which was added such a burden to the workload.
We had the board artists drawing the song.
The board artists. Sorry, the board artists were drawing the song sequences, and that was just killing everybody. So it was kind of nice to be able to have that kind of conversation where you're like, hey, you know what? Let's rethink our process here and make that work better.
It kind of stinks when you're in that position. You're a board artist. You're like, man, this song is so good. I wish I had an extra 2 or 3 weeks so I could really You're just oh my gosh, there just isn't enough time for me to really get in there and do it the justice it deserves. So. But
that was good. And then we could make the case of you know what, we need we need song specialists who that is their full focus. That minute to minute and a half song is their full focus. And anyway, it was just kind of nice to see. I don't know. I was happy for the feedback we got to sort of open up to a different way of collaborating on that. I think it was helpful.
I've drawn a very off-model scratch here.
I love it. It's like he's so angry, grumpy.
Something I remember about Molly that like one of the things that stood out was like when I first started, you guys gave us time to get used to drawing the characters. You gave us I've never had that before, and that was so helpful.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, because
really?
Yeah,
wow.
It was. I was like, wow, this is like you get to like kind of be in the environment. You get to know everybody on the team, but you also get to like work with the characters and see how they might interact, and that was really useful.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Do you remember though? Too. I mean, obviously you do. Like you guys would just draw sort of wild moments of here's just a thing, and we pinned those up all over the place on the walls. And then drew inspiration. So a lot of those things where it was just you learning to draw the characters and what's a funny little moment found its way into the show in one way or another. And helped a lot of like helping define Daryl. What Daryl's dynamic was like was found in that exploration.
What did you guys have the most fun with, like, or like in general, just show running? Do you guys like working with the voice actors? Do you have a favorite thing? I guess
there's what's fun about running the show is every day is different. I mean, there's a rhythm to things, sort of like okay, Fridays tend to be mixed days or whatever, something like that. But it's not the same day you're doing the same thing every day. And I think any job in this industry to some extent that's true. But it's particularly true of show. Like you get to move to today we're gonna record an actor, then we have to look at this animatic, then we're gonna talk to the writers, hear a pitch about the story we're cracking. Then it's lunchtime. Then we're going to come back in the afternoon. We've got to mix all day in the afternoon, and we've got a script to read tonight. It's a lot of different things all happening at the same time. It can be a little dizzying, can be a little exhausting at times, but it's fun that there's so much going on all at the same time. It's we had a moment. It wasn't on this show, but it was on the previous show we worked on, the Lego Star Wars show we worked on, which was animated in Denmark, right? So we worked with an entire production team that was Zoom didn't exist at the time, but we were using Skype. And, they were going to bed as we were getting up, and vice versa. Anyway, the show got an Emmy nomination, and they all flew out to be part of the daytime Emmys, which whatever. But the entire cast showed up for the. We didn't win, but we all went to a hotel afterwards and took over their bar. And looking around, I realized, oh, hey, look, there's our music composer talking to one of the actors, and there's one of the storyboard artists talking to one of the sound engineers and stuff. And I realized Bill and I are the only people here who know everybody. We're I was like, oh, that's so-and-so and that's so-and-so, and they're meeting for the first time. And it I don't know why it hadn't dawned on me that all these people don't really know each other, but they just don't. That's just the nature of production. And it was cool to see that moment. It was kind of cool to feel like, oh, we're the central nexus of all this, and that's one of the things that's fun about the job. I wish everybody could know each other. And maybe next time we do a show, we'll be a little more intentional about it. It was hard during a pandemic, but I wish everybody could know everybody. But that I think everybody who works on Molly has brought so much special. They've all brought themselves to it, and it's neat that we're the guys at the center of it, and we get to see what everybody is bringing to the party.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I also think it's funny. Bob, at his core, is a writer, and I'm not.
What does that mean?
Well,
I'll say.
Yeah. I think for me, like when I was in college making films or whatever, to me, writing the script was always the blueprint for the production. And I found it sort of, it would almost be like an architect who draws the blueprint, but you want the building built, right? The blueprint by itself is not super fun. But Bob actually gets a lot of satisfaction, like if we do a script and we're proud of the script, but it doesn't get produced, and every writer's got that story at some point. Bob still can feel a lot of satisfaction but that still was good work. Whereas I'm usually grinding my teeth, going like, I never made it to movie. So I think part of, for me then, because I love, and I really am kind of kidding about the whole not being a writer thing, because I love the storytelling. I love bringing all that to life. But I love the journey and the process of seeing, this idea that what if we did it from that little 3x5 card? What if we went from there to this thing that you can watch on Disney Plus? That, to me, that journey is so fun and exciting and kind of like a little miracle every single time.
No, that's certainly true.
Yeah.
Well, that's so interesting to hear, like, how, like, you guys complement each other, and like that, like, I feel like both of these energies are like really useful in both part of the process, like the pitching at first and then like the making of the show.
I honestly don't know how EPs who are just one person do it. Like, and there's some examples we all know of people just going straight up nuts from doing this job. And I think part of it is part of the advantage of having a partner is you always have somebody there to keep you sane.
Totally.
Yeah.
We always have, like, whenever, and it's, everybody thinks I'm always going to be the pessimist, but it's not true.
Yeah, that is not true.
We switch back and forth, and there's always a point, not always a point, but whenever somebody is like, oh my god, we're done, they finally figured out we don't know what we're doing, we're screwed, this is the end of our career. The other guy's like, we're fine. It's fine. It's great. We've never been better. What are you talking about? And it's good to have that kind of perspective, and that again, it keeps you sane. And I think you can get, if you don't have somebody there to check you like that, you can get some tunnel vision in this job and obsess over inconsequential things.
Yeah, 100%.
And let consequential things suffer for it.
This is really great to hear. I think that's also something that's kind of like really, I don't know, like creative duos. I'm always just like, what is it like having this like creative partnership? It sounds so cool, and like you just gotta like laid it out. Like, yeah, you also like keep each other like grounded.
Even in pitching, though Bob is the one who's doing the presenting. Yeah. When you are pitching, you are focused on that job, that task, right? You are making sure that you are communicating clearly and making good eye contact and doing all that stuff. But you can't really also be at the same time in observation mode. Right. So part of then what I'm doing while Bob is pitching is I'm watching who we're pitching to, their reaction. So I can see that little weird head turn or the something, whatever, that basically...
they didn't get that.
They didn't get that. Reiterate. So then I'll interject and be like, so it's this or this, and I'll give it something more concrete to help, fill that in. So me too. I mean, I can't imagine doing this by myself, partly because I know I don't think I could. I don't think I would be given... People would be like, you hit the bricks. Yeah.
When we pitch, we I'll rehearse it a few times, but I like to keep it loose. Like, I don't like it to be canned. I'd like it to sound like, hey, this is somebody sitting down, and they're telling you a story about this thing that happened, and they're very excited to tell it to you. If it gets canned, I think it starts to feel... and that's just my preference. If you're someone who feels like if I don't have every word of this, an intonation of this memorized, it's going to be a disaster. Go for it. That there's, everybody does.
It's about your comfort level, really.
Yeah, exactly. But my comfort level is if I rehearse it too much, it'll start to feel stale.
Yeah.
The other part of it too is, and this is my personal little soapbox, but I will frequently see creators, showrunners, grinding their teeth at whatever studio they're at, which I get it. It can be a very frustrating process. It can be, we all have our stories, right? But there's also a part of me that's like, I can't afford to produce this by myself. This is not. I would never be able to assemble the crew of talent that and actually pay them all by myself. So I actually really appreciate the partnership with this studio, and part of what's crazy about the whole pitch process and the development process is that you're convincing the studio to invest just millions and millions of dollars into something that you thought about.
Right.
Right. And it's, it's that thing of like, so this idea of a positive, optimistic tween girl or, 13-year-old girl and this grumpy ghost. Yeah, let's just pour a fortune into that and roll the dice and see how it does. I think that's just a crazy proposition, and the fact that we've been lucky enough to get to do it on a number of occasions is pretty terrific.
Exactly. This job, there are days that are frustrating, of course, like any job. But if you can't be happy doing this job, my God, it's something you need to sit down and talk to a therapist about. Like, this is you're spinning magic out of nothing every day. It's fun. Like, if you can't have fun making a cartoon, oh my, I feel for you.
And I think and also there's a part of me, and I don't know, I hope you felt this on the show, Megan, but I literally feel the magic that comes out of your pen. And that it's that, looking over your shoulder at your Cintiq or something and seeing how you're creating. And to me, I just feel like that is, I don't know, you're bringing something to life, in a drawing. And then I think that fans, around the world see that. And then what's even more amazing to me, I think, is that this strange collaboration that we all have, this team putting it together, and you put it out in the world, and then people have an emotional reaction, or an emotional response to what we've made together. And, I see people on social media sometimes just talking about how, this work, especially in certain things, an episode we did, whatever, touched their life, changed their life, made them feel something profound. And wow, I just feel like that's just, it wasn't just about, I mean, sometimes it's just about entertaining, right? But sometimes, and having a good time. You hope they all have a good time. But sometimes it's, you're speaking to their core in a way that fundamentally resonates and changes them. And I don't think there's too much of a higher calling for any human being but to be able to do something like that for another person. So it's
there are doctors out there though.
Yeah. They're a close second, I'll give you that.
Close second.
Yeah, because recently when the drop of season 2 of Molly came out, I was watching it, and then I went back and looked at my boards, and the dance episode, I remember the Kim Possible dance scene was so formative to me, and then getting to do that on Molly, I was getting emotional looking at my stuff. I was like, this is a dream come true.
Well, and likewise for the writer of that episode, Brandon, he, right? It's Brandon, right?
It was Brandon. Yep.
That he had always wanted to write one of those teen romance comedy kind of things. So that's his wheelhouse. That's his wheelhouse. So he had that same kind of feeling of watching that come together. So the synergy, which I know it's an overused word, but let's use it. But the synergy of, his script, your boarding, that then, all the timing and music and effects all come together and making something. I'm incredibly proud of the episode. I think it's so fun and it works and it's a good emotional roller coaster ride and
That's so cool. Man, it's true. Making cartoons is just, it's really fun. It's really great. And it is magic because it's like bringing drawings to life and like with stories.
And transmitting them around the world.
Yeah, that's really crazy.
Yeah.
When you think about it. I was wondering if you guys are down to go into some questions from the fans of the show.
Well, sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
I'll tell you.
Well, we bored them all this time. I guess they deserve something.
Do you think there are any left? But okay.
All right.
There's some fun ones. Obviously, like
you might have to edit this and put this part first.
Yeah. We want to, like, obviously, like, we like to talk shop on creative block more than we talk about like the the shows. So I think the questions that we're going to pick are like because we had a ton, and I think so from our patron Xiaolin Showdown. I think this is a fun one because you guys kind of like maybe hinted at it a little bit. Do you guys ever butt heads showrunning with different creative ideas?
Yes, all the time.
Do
you guys have like some fun stories about that?
Well, it's not. I don't know if we have any fun stories, but I think maybe Bill's wrong. Maybe Bill will disagree and say we have fun stories. But here's what Bill and I have learned over the years: we'll have these. They're not fights anymore. It's just creatively expressed. Yeah, we used to have fights, and then somewhere along the way we're like, well, that's a waste of time. Stop doing that. It's all just about making the show better, and we express ourselves with our passion, and then at one point we'll go, all right, if it means that much to you, we're going to go do it your way, or no, I'm going to keep pushing this until you see you doing it my way. But what we find more often than not is there's usually a third way that is better than
either of the ways.
So either the ways. Our fights, I think we've become less passionate about it as time has gone on. Now it's just about, what if we tried it this way? I don't know if I see it working that way. Well, I think it could work this way. Let's explore it. We explore it. We go down the road, and then the other guy will go, yeah, okay, I see it. Well, we're going to do that. I'm excited about it, and we could do it this way too. Yes. Or we run down the road and go, nah, it's not working. Yeah,
we tend to go for trying to find something that will make us both happy, because I sort of feel like that is where better success will be. But a fresh example was yesterday we were at the mix, and there was a music cue that wasn't working, and so you had one approach, I had another approach, and we kept playing around until we finally found something that worked for both of us, and I think it
plays great now.
Yeah, it plays great. But it took a bit.
Yeah. But I don't know that we butt heads as much anymore.
No, we certainly don't.
It's just, now it's just about, hey, I see this. What if we tried it like this? It's more, dispassionate's not the word, but it's more...
Well, it's become less personal about challenging each other's creative...
And it's got to be my way, because I have the vision of it, and more just about, hey, here's an idea. What do you think of this?
Right.
Let's think about that.
And maybe I'm hopeful that maybe that is something I hope that we have learned to do with the crew a little more too, because if something is bumping, you guys too. I mean, boy, Bob and I, we talked about how many times on Molly McGee did somebody come to us and say, at this moment, this isn't sitting with me right, or this doesn't work right, or whatever, and it forced us to kind of roll up our sleeves and re-examine. And man, is it better for what we re-examined. So I'm just happy.
Everybody's got their blind spots.
Yeah, totally.
And some of them are shocking how once somebody explains it to you, you're like, oh, how did we not see that?
That could have been taken incredibly poorly.
That's really cool. It's really cool to hear also like that the crew also just like felt confident coming up to you guys and like talking to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think to be fair, sometimes board artists would go to their director and say, "Hey, can I bend your ear on this?" And then the directors would come to us and say, "Hey, so and so raised this concern. What do you guys think?"
Mm-hmm.
We tried to
just throw Megan under the bus, just like I think it's great, but Meg, no, that didn't happen.
Megan was complaining all the time. No, I think I hope that the crew felt comfortable in that process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hope so.
I'm sure it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's an intimidating thing to go to your EPs and say, "I know about this."
I think a lot of the times you'd board a thing and then you'd see it later in animatic and you're like, oh wait, the staging plays so much better, like your director or like someone else would change it, and you're just like, just going at it without an ego and being like, oh, I'm taking this and I'm learning for next time.
That's exactly the way to put it, Megan. Thank you for summarizing it all in like 13 seconds when Bill and I killed like 5 minutes going out. It's like we've taken our ego out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's
that's
a factor of our age. Like, we've as young men or young people, we want to see your vision of it. And as you get older, at least what has been, I think, true for Bill and me, is we've just sort of said, it's about making this thing great. And whoever's got the best idea to make it great, let's go with that.
Yeah. Well, I hope. Anyway, we'll see. Megan will be like, and now we're going to have a very special counterpoint interview coming up with some people from the show.
Yeah, this is why I brought you all on here today. We got you.
That's right.
It's an intervention.
Yeah. Caller number one. What's your? Oh
no. We have this fun question from Katie, or patron Katie. What would be your recommendation for stories for the beginning writer to try to focus on writing first?
That's a good question.
I would say it's less about what stories should you write and more about, are you writing consistently? And there's no excuses for this. If you have a full-time job, then you got to get up an hour early every morning and write, or spend the time late writing. You'll find your voice the more you work. Yeah.
I mean, a simple exercise, I think, to kind of get sort of the ball rolling with people, because I think the blank page is just a tyranny. We did that whole episode about Molly's mom being intimidated by the blank canvas, and I think that's a real thing.
We've all been there.
Yeah. Is write a joke, because a joke essentially is 3-act structure in a nutshell. There's some sort of setup, whatever the conflict or what the middle is, and then the payoff. So write a joke, and then pick a topic, write a joke about that thing, then write 2 more jokes about that same topic. And because what that also then does is remind you of like, oh, maybe my first joke about that one wasn't actually my best. It might have been my second or third. It was actually the funniest joke. So it gets you, it kind of starts working the muscles about, changing and looking at possibilities, and not necessarily going with your very first instinct. And so that's just a good little practice thing to do to kind of warm you up, and then you can, and then if, again, I think you can master short forms and work longer. People jump into like a feature script. That is so daunting. I remember jumping in my very first feature script, which was before Bob and I were partners, and I had written the whole thing kind of front to end without really any true understanding, and it was 50 pages long, and I was like, uh-oh. This is short. So I think that you can master, doing sort of short form stuff first if you want to, just the basic storytelling, just to kind of get in the habit, to get comfortable in sort of the basics of storytelling, before then taking on the whole, what is the nitty gritty of screenplay writing, where you're, getting into the nuts and bolts of what's your action slug say, how much do you say, how much do you not say, how do you write pithy dialogue? Those are all sort of different skill sets. But starting with beginning, middle, end is just a great place to sort of practice.
And it's an old trick, but I'll say it because maybe young people haven't heard it. Like, write your script, then put it in a drawer and walk away from it for a week. Come back and look at it a week later and see if it's what you thought you wrote. Because you can especially if you don't have a partner, you can get that tunnel vision and not be aware of what you're actually doing.
There's also, if I may be so bold, to talk about to your listeners, there are so many books about screenwriting, and it's maybe good to know some of it and then to forget it, because a lot of them are they're sort of like an autopsy, right? They take some successful film and then they break it down into its script components, and they explain to you, for example, why Casablanca is brilliant.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And by the way, I've read that book a number of times, and there's a lot of good stuff in that. But the trick is, you can break down why something was great, but then reverse engineering it, it doesn't necessarily turn out to be true. You can't, because you know all those little pieces, then build a successful film. And I mean, we can all think about movies. You know, Star Wars completely violates many of those rules. You don't meet Luke Skywalker for like 20 minutes or something. You know, it's like, he's the main character. What do you mean you did 20 minutes of movie without meeting the main character? So I think that it's kind of good to know those basics, but they can be kind of oppressive to feel like you've got to, it says by page 10 I'm supposed to be here, and page 118 I should be here, and as if it is a map, and I don't think it is.
Yeah, I think the other danger of those kinds of books are you can spend all your time preparing to write and never write. And I think the best thing you can do for yourself is write. Just write. Or if you're an artist, start drawing or painting or sculpting or whatever it is your jam is. But just start doing it. There's no better time than the present. Stop procrastinating. Just go.
Because there's
and it'll be crap. That's okay.
Yeah,
it's gonna be crap.
Yeah, I feel like that whole 10,000 hours thing of like you've got to bleed through just a lot of terrible writing or drawing before you actually, to a point where like, okay, now I'm pretty consistently not drawing or writing crap, And
the other part of this, and sometimes I'll say it to Bill when we're, when we're fortunate enough to be working in the same space and it's not a pandemic, I'll hear him stop and I'll be just like, Bill, just start typing. Just go. Just stop. I can tell you're overthinking over there. Just start going. And we can always fix it. But it's so much easier to fix it than it is to create it. So just get it down, and then you'll be able to see clearly, that's not what's not working. But, look, these computers have delete keys, and, your Cintiq has the erase buttons. You can fix all this. But you got to start it first before you fix it.
I think that's a great segue into the question we like to ask on this podcast, which is called Creative Block. Do you guys ever, and you guys were just talking about the episode with Molly's mom who's like dealing with that. Do you guys ever experience creative block?
Sure.
And if you do, how does it feel like, and how do you deal with it?
Well, that's another part. Yes, of course. Everybody who's in the arts.
You would be surprised. Some people on this podcast have been like, "No, never. I've never blocked."
So you've had liars.
Yeah. We're calling them out right now. Calling them out.
The other good thing about having a partner is you're going to run into that creative block a lot less, because you're going to be like, I'm stuck on this idea, I'm stuck on this, what do you think? And they'll have a solution for you, or tell you it's a terrible idea, we should just abandon it, or ask you, have you thought about it this way? So yeah, I think we don't hit the creative block all that often because we have this collaboration.
But there are, one of the things likewise, when Bob can hear my keyboard stopping, and he knows I'm overthinking it, one of the things I find really funny is, and I will clean it up a little bit because I don't know who your listeners are, but Bob will be typing, and I'll hear him banging the keyboards, and he's saying, "I'll say crap." That's what he says. Okay. Crap. This is crap. This is total crap. This is garbage. I hate this. This is garbage. But he's just throwing it out there, and then this has happened to us so many times. Like the next day, you look at that script in the morning, you go, "Yeah, that was garbage. Let's throw that out." But it might sort of go, "You know what? That approach was wrong. Let's try another approach." And kind of sometimes you have to do the bad version before you can find the good version. So just be patient that's part of the process. Yeah.
When we're writing features, I start my day every morning by just printing out everything we've done and reading it and marking it up with notes. And that'll kill the first hour of the day. And
it feels productive even if it isn't necessary.
Well, I think there's a honing process to it. And then like by the time you get through, okay, I've marked up and changed everything that's come before. Now you've got a head of steam and you're ready to go into that next stuff. So.
Another trick that I've heard other screenwriters use and that I will use on occasion, especially in feature work, is to stop mid-scene. So that if you know, like, okay, I know where the scene goes and I could finish the scene, but you stop because tomorrow in the morning you'll pick it up and you'll know how to finish the scene. And it kind of gets some creative momentum going, and you can kind of keep going that way. Little tricks that you can...
Little tricks of the trade. That's really fun. I hadn't heard that before. I do want to get back to a couple of listener questions because I think some of them are really, really good. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get through all of them, but we're going to try to get through the ones that are relevant to the craft. So from @FlippySuper on Twitter, what is your advice on how to write optimistic characters? I like how you write Molly as someone who can be in the wrong even with positive intentions, and it makes her stand out among other characters like her.
So we intentionally approached Molly as not perfect because if there's somebody who is that optimistic and perfect and not prone to making mistakes, you're gonna just want to kill her. That's somebody everybody's just gonna hate. But if she's bright and optimistic, but will fall on her face from every now and again, either through sheer physical slapstick or going in with the best of intentions and messing up, that makes the character a little more vibrant.
Yeah.
And empathetic, yeah. And the other thing is, we tried to find quirks for Molly. And, the fact that she hates close-up magic is something that came out of the writer's room that we super embraced. It came from Sammy Crowley.
Sammy! She love this show just before.
Sammy hates close-up magic.
She hates close-up magic because it's a lie.
And she literally said to us, and we put it in the episode, that she said, I mean, of course I love real magic, but close-up magic is just, all right, whoa. Go back to the real magic part,
And we had that discussion. It started to feel like this is a trait we have to steal from Molly. Sorry, Sammy, we're taking your life story and making it Molly's.
Yep.
And there's so many little aspects of Molly that have that same kind of origin story. The turnips, that came out of Madison Bateman's childhood. She grew up.
Family garden was turnips.
Family garden was full of turnips. The whole turnip thing came out of that. So, yeah, you look for those little moments you can use to put a little less gloss on your perfect character.
I think, Megan, did you drew the scenes of at the dance when Molly and Scratch are having their argument in the hallway, right? And which is, by the way, one of my absolute favorite moments of the whole series. And the capital W, wow, which was just so perfect. But I think what's so nice about that, it's Molly, and she's kind of right and kind of wrong at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a way is Scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I think so she is optimistic and to the question, but she is flawed there. She's not entirely wrong and she's not entirely right.
Mm-hmm.
And she and Scratch are both trying to find their way forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just sort of a real conflict, and you achieved that so beautifully in the episode. But I think that to me is sort of what helps keep Molly from just being a pure Pollyanna kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The
other thing I'll add to it is that find ways to test your optimistic character, and really throw the world at them and let them get beat down by it, and then bounce back eventually.
Yeah,
because that it's that whatever.
It's about resilience.
Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever doesn't kill your character is going to make them stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And sometimes, in Scratch's case, maybe what kills him will also maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Stay tuned.
We'll find
out.
We were just talking earlier about your writer, Brandon Hong.
I saw he had a special question on Twitter.
Oh,
he asked on Twitter, who's your favorite writer and why is it me?
I'll say it is Brandon, and it's Sammy, and it's Madison, and it's Perry and Cynthia
and Paul
and Paul.
Peter.
Oh my God! Don't leave Paul, Peter.
Gloria.
Yeah, they're all our favorite writer, and we couldn't pick amongst them. They've all done such brilliant work on the show.
And we probably forgot somebody.
But also,
and Mia.
Oh my gosh, Mia. Everybody else we didn't list.
Yes.
I'll say Brandon's my favorite writer because we.
What are you gonna say?
Brandon's my favorite writer because when we first met him, he said, "Hey guys, remember me from Nickelodeon?" And I was like, "No, I don't remember this guy." And this was during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, and it was a slightly awkward moment. And then we got it and we moved past it and we hired him for the show, blah, blah, blah. Then the pandemic moved forward slowly. Everybody got their shots. Everybody was safe. And we're like, you know what, writers? Let's get together in a park, have a slice of pizza together, and just meet each other for the first time in person. And as soon as Brandon walked up, I realized Brandon keeps his camera very low on his desk, and I thought he was 6 feet tall. And that's why I didn't recognize him from Nickelodeon. Once I saw him in actual, I was like, "Oh, you're that guy. I remember you now." And he's my height. I'm very short. So that's why Brandon's my favorite writer, because he's short like me.
And Bobby Whitney, Bob.
Oh, Bobby Whitney, jeez. God, that was such a bad idea to list them all because
we're gonna do it together.
Soldering pain.
We're like an old lawnmower starting it.
Should have just gone with Brandon's my favorite because he's short. Been done with it.
And I'll wrap it up with a question from Instagram. Just because everyone listening, we are on Instagram now. Please give us a little look-see on Instagram because we don't know what's happening with Twitter. From our right.
Trying to move to Instagram, I find it befuddling.
It's
TikTok. I can't eat it, but whatever. We'll get
scary.
it. Yeah.
My daughter keeps trying to get me to figure out TikTok. She's like, it's just like this. I'm like, no, I cannot.
It's chaos.
This is chaos.
I feel like
and I can't figure it out.
I love talking about social media, but I will restrain myself.
All right, sorry.
All right, Instagram.
From at Lavenderia_Dinero.
Mm-hmm.
How does the writing impact the animation process? Can you give examples of what not to do when writing for animation? I think it's kind of interesting.
Oh, yes.
You guys think about
Everybody
that.
loves a crowd scene.
Right, Megan? You like what if you have like 30 characters all talking and walking
crowds,
around?
No swarms of anything. Don't write swarms.
Yeah.
Don't you dare.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it sparingly. If you do it all the time, they're going to come after you.
I think part of it is the more you kind of know about the process and how it works, and even this specificities of whatever version of animation you're using. So CGI has a whole different set of tools. Things that can be very, very easy in CGI are hard in traditional 2D or Harmony, and vice versa. There's some things that just seem... and
there's things about Harmony that are, not a problem in 2D, big problem in Harmony. So it's just... And again, this is part of the learning... why I feel like, hey, don't be too eager to run your first show straight out of school. Like, take your time, learn the ropes, learn the limitations. Because when you learn the limitations and you know them, you know where you can bend the rules, and you know when occasionally you can break them without killing your crew. And that's ultimately what you want to get to. Is you don't want to leave a trail of broken bodies behind you, because
hashtag bubble crowd.
Oh my god!
And there's ways to do everything. You just have to be smart about it. The thing I always go to is, again, I'm a big nerd. I love James Cameron's Aliens, and when you think of aliens, it's right there in the title. There's more than one of them, and it feels like when you watch that movie, there's thousands of them. But you never see more than 6 on screen, because he was very, very clever. They only had 6 costumes, and he was very, very clever at how he shot them. So you can imply through sound effects and clever staging and blocking that there's an army over there, but be aware of how you're going to do it, because you've got 6 costumes.
I love that. Yeah, that's so cool. Like, that's really awesome too. I think also something that I really was excited to hear about, like, from you guys and like your experience, is that like it takes a really long time to get a show picked up, to pitch a million times and finally get something picked up, to get all that experience, because there's a couple what's the word? Sometimes like the stars line up and you'll have like a very young prodigy, but I feel like the norm in animation is more like you got to be around for a while.
Well, and at one level, you look at Citizen Kane, and that was Orson Welles' first film, really, at what, he was 23?
21? 20, yeah.
So, bonafide...
Not bad.
Bonafide genius, right?
They do exist.
They do exist. Had trouble the rest of his life replicating that success. And that level of filmmaking. And that is not to, sort of talk smack about Orson Welles. But it's just more sort of to say that...
why we're better than Orson Welles. That's what I'm glad
that's what we're going to get to. No, I think part of it is... I think Steven Spielberg somewhat is the director he is because the movie Jaws was a train wreck at every turn making it. And he, what he thought was going to be his vision of having a mechanical shark that, performed as expected and, would have been a very different film. And because it constantly was broken, he had to constantly problem solve and figure out a way around it. So he's turned to people he admired and people, things like he looked at Hitchcock films and other kinds of storytelling that he had come to love and looked at how they solved some of those problems. And I think that resilience of getting through that hellacious film shoot helped him kind of craft and he learned a lot of lessons, so it helped him craft, I think, his style moving forward and his ability to sort of approach his projects. So I think that, yes, like you say, there are some bona fide geniuses who come out of the gate. If they can continue to being bona fide geniuses, that's even more rare. And I think, generally speaking, there are just some really good storytellers and very good filmmakers who get better and better with their craft the more they kind of do it. and learn from their mistakes and work their way through issues. I had a film prof once say to me that filmmaking is just problem solving. And I think that there's just a lot of truth in that. And, that whole auteur theory, I'm not...
It's also problem making.
I mean, that's true. Right?
You paint yourself in a corner and then you're like, okay.
How do we do this?
How are we going to get out of this one?
That's so true.
Yeah, so... But anyway, that's why I think I just personally have a lot of appreciation for the talented people we've worked with. I see kind of constantly growing and learning and improving and getting just better and better with each step. Very happy that we've had a number of people on our show grow from like revisionist to artist and board artist and even getting opportunities to direct or things that it's like that's pretty cool because people are learning and growing. And hopefully that means that when they get handed the reins, or rather when they've earned the place to get the reins, they're ready to go, and they won't be just a one and done. They will be able to be creative showrunners for a long, long time.
And like these are great words of wisdom that are perfect to end this episode. No more to be added. I'm still working on my ability to segue. This is going to be my new running gag now. It's just me just been like, it's the end.
Just get like a referee whistle and just like, and there it is. That's the end of the inning. And so
a gong.
That's right.
No more timeout.
That's right. Bill and Bob are taking the bench.
And with Bill and Bob on the bench, that is the end of this creative block.
This was fun.
Thanks for being our guest and sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
It was a good time.
Yeah. Fun questions.
And thanks to our listeners. Follow us on Twitter at CRTVBlock, where we ask for drawing prompts and questions to ask our guests. Huge thanks to our editor, Clemens, for editing the podcast, and Marco for helping us produce the show.
Thanks, Marco.
Yay!
Thanks, Marco. Marco, our new producer. This is his their second shout out. They're doing amazing. And if you love our show.
Wait, we're the second one? Poor Marco. Oh, man.
I'm sorry, Marco.
Sorry.
If you love our show, then support us on Patreon. Becoming a patron gets you early access to interviews as well as bonus episodes. It helps us pay for things like Zoom and the Drive and our amazing little tiny crew who, without them, the show would not exist. Click the link in the description of this episode. I have been your host, V.
And I was Megan. Keep being creative, and we'll see you next week.
Bye!
Bye! Thank you!